Hello everybody, my name is Ignasi Grau, I'm the Director of OIDEL and I'm happy to do this video to launch a new series of video on education and COVID-19. As you know, we are in a particular context. It feels like we are in front of the second wave of COVID, and also we are in a particular context, which is the reopening of the schools, or as in French we say, la rentrée scolaire. This has raised many questions, especially this summer, right? While bars and clubs were open, when even the biggest sports competition were restarting, many governments were still hesitating on should we open the schools. This is raising many questions about what is the place of the right to education of our society. And this is not just a question that we have to ask for the current situation, but also about the post-COVID world. On this context, OIDEL has launched a research called Learned Lessons during the first COVID-19 wave for the reopening of the schools. This is a long research. I don't want to go through all of that, but I want to share with you three of the most interesting insights we get from this research. The first one concerns the state strategies to the provision of education. What have we observed? We have observed that the states have limited their strategies to the imitation and replication of what other states have done. On this regard, we can say that the initiative of China and Italy have played an important role on the strategies that have been further developed by other countries. And what have been these strategies? Well, strategies have been quite diverse, but one big pattern in developed countries is that they have developed and they have ensured the provision of education mostly through online materials. While in developing countries, they have ensured the provision of education through broadcast materials such as TV programs, radio programs, or even in some cases, the distribution of written materials. This, as you can imagine, is because in these countries, the accessibility to a computer for all the children were more complicated than in developed countries. But also, it's interesting to see like there are other ways to ensure education other than online materials on this crisis. The second important aspect concerns parents. Parents have been an actor that have been really recognized during this pandemic. It was made clear that they were playing a fundamental role in the education of their children, and they have played an important role during the shutdown as substitutes of teachers and learning coaches. The recognition of parents have been highlighted by international institutions and governments more than ever before, or at least more than, from our experience, it has been the time in the last 10 years that parents have been more quoted and referenced. What has been the role of governments to support the efforts of parents on this context? Well, indeed, many schools and governments have focused their energy on supporting parents during the remote learning and even after. We can highlight that the countries that have developed or that have taken more into account parents during this crisis have been Latin America and the Caribbean, followed by Asia and the Pacific, where many countries have prepared target materials to support parents, or even they have bear into account their opinions and their contributions in the realization of the strategies to ensure the right to education in these countries. On the other hand, the majority of countries in Europe and North America have not developed a strategy for supporting parents. One big conclusion that we can draw from our research is that in Western countries, although the efforts of certain countries, there is still a lot of room to improve the support of parents. Probably parents have been more heard than ever before, and probably they also have been better recognized than before. Nevertheless, there is still an important percent of countries that have not transformed these words in concrete actions, and many concrete actions are insufficient. Acknowledging parents cannot just consist on taking profit of them when we need them, but to respect their decisions and acknowledging their rights. Finally, one important point that concerns us of this crisis is the problems concerning funding. As you know, with this crisis, this is not just a sanitary or a health crisis. This is also an economical crisis. And of course, this is having a huge impact on the realization of the right to education. One group of actors that are particularly suffering this crisis are non-governmental, non-profit schools, especially those who depend on tuition fees. While during this crisis, we have seen that many of these schools are suffering, and just to focus on the Western world, in countries where there is no public funding to support these schools, many of them are considering closing, and some of them they have not reopened. I'm thinking particular critical cases such as Albania and Italy. Also, in countries where there is public support for public school, there has been some tensions around that, and I'm thinking about Spain, where not only the government has decided to launch a new law that can limit the right of parents to access or to choose education for their children, but also there has been a huge discussion on limiting the access of these schools to the economic recovery budgets. Having talked about our research, and now that we are still in the middle of this crisis, we are forced to question ourselves new questions, and even we are forced to question again traditional questions on the right to education. And to put some examples, which would be the future education in a post-COVID world? What should be the place of new technologies in education? Which involvement parents and governmental authorities should have in the realization of the right to education? How to guarantee the realization of the right to education in the second wave? And can the realization of the right to education be limited to provision? In the following weeks, we are going to share a series of videos with tremendous, amazing stakeholders that are working on the field of the right to education with the aim of answering or giving some clues on how answering these questions and understanding better the current educational crisis. Many thanks for being here, and stay tuned.